teoría y fue desarrollador principal de PolitiFact, plataforma que verifica el discurso político y que se convirtió en el primer sitio web en recibir el premio Pulitzer en el 2009. Antes de convertirse en desarrollador web, fue un cartero de investigación galardonado desde 2005 hasta 2007. Ha sido coautor de una serie de historias premiadas sobre los minerales en la desaparición de Florida. Este trabajo luego se sirvió en el libro Paradise, Florida's Vanishing Wetlands and the Failure of No-Lead Loss, publicado en 2009 por University Press of Florida. En 2009, fundó Hatay Consulting, una empresa que desarrolla soluciones para medios de comunicación. Hatay ha agregado a lanzar una nueva e importante unidad de periodismo sin fines de lucro en el Texas Tribune y ha producido sitios web abandonados para otros clientes. Apreciamos mucho que Mara esté aquí. Él ha sido uno de nuestros últimos invitados a llegar, que viene de Lincoln, del Estado de Nebraska. Y no hay vuelos directos, obviamente, se quita, así que llegó a la una de la mañana, pero está aquí bien y perfectas condiciones para compartir con nosotros. Bienvenido, Mara.
I'm fine. I'm loud enough. So I'm going to speak in English because my Spanish is terrible. Well, it's funny because I was going to say I'm an American, which means my English isn't very good either. So oh, fabulous. Fabulous. Okay. Am I loud enough that I'm reaching the back? I do this for a living, so I'm pretty loud. I also used to coach young boys football, so I can yell if I need to. Just want to say real quick before I get started, students, I'm immensely impressed that you're here. It's Friday. You don't have classes. I would love to take you all back to Lincoln and show my students how it's done. Thank you. Thank you for all being here. Thank you for coming back after lunch. Hopefully I'm going to keep you awake for a little while. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. You heard the introduction there, but I always wanted to be a reporter since I was little. My grandmother was the editor of a newspaper, and she used to tell me stories about doing that, and I thought that sounded fun. I'm also that kid who got in trouble in school because he couldn't sit still, and I always got in trouble because I couldn't focus. And being a reporter is the greatest job ever if you have trouble focusing, because there's always something going on and you can go do something else. So between that and my interest in technology, I have found a thing that I could do with my life where I got to merge those things together. I got to play with some pretty cool toys, and I never had to sit still for very long, which was perfect. I started out as just a newspaper reporter, no different than any other. I wrote stories. My first job was on the night desk. I covered police and crime from 3 to midnight every night, which after college was great because I didn't want to get up before noon anyway. So I did that for a while, but while I was on quiet nights, I was developing my skills as a data journalist. And I was realizing that with data, I could tell stories that other people couldn't. And that really drove a lot of the decisions that I made about things that I wanted to do. Could this lead to something that somebody else couldn't do? And so I spent my time just like this, and I wanted to be like this. But the more that I started to learn about technology, and the more I started to learn about my own limitations as just a human on the earth, I started to realize that the reporter I wanted to be probably looked more like this. And oh, I wish. I actually, oh, that hurt. Anybody want to help him? But really, it's probably more like this. I want to be Tony Stark, mostly for the billions, but I want Jarvis. And I think journalists should have something like Jarvis to help them out. And so a lot of what I do now, and a lot of the things that interest me, and a lot of the things that I play with, are this idea of building a new kind of reporter. And a reporter that looks more like Iron Man, where it's me, the reporter, the journalist, the person with the brain, the person with the heart and the soul. But then I get to build onto that with technology. I get to build my own robotic suit. And in some cases, literally, I get to build a robotic suit. So this is what I mean. We can augment ourselves. We can augment the work that we do with technology. Reporters are my favorite people on earth. Journalists, there's no group of people I love hanging out with more. If you leave this university and never work in journalism, wherever you live, find where the reporters hang out. Because I guarantee you that bar and that restaurant is the best one in town. It's the most fun. The stories are going to be insane. So we value reporters who are smart, they're energetic, they're able to get information, they're good problem solvers. They can talk to people. They know how to engage. They know how to get people to talk to them. And we should value that. And we will forever. As long as human beings are human beings, as long as we are telling stories to each other, then that reporter is going to have a job. But what if we added to that? So to give you an idea of where my brain has gone, I got to take you on a little trip through history here. And I fervently believe that a lot of really old habits that journalists have that have been ingrained literally over centuries have to die in order for the internet and journalism on the internet to truly take off. So how deeply ingrained am I talking about? We're going to go back to 1455. The invention of the printing press. And Johannes Gutenberg in Germany begins printing Bibles, which was revolutionary for the time. If you had a Bible in that period of time, it meant you were very wealthy because you could pay a monk to handwrite you a copy of the Bible. Gutenberg comes along and starts mass producing them, which produces literacy on a mass scale. But how long did it take before newspapers started coming around? Anybody know? Anybody know? 200 years. 200 years between the invention of the printing press and the first newspapers that we know of. Quick aside. Anybody know how long it took before the first dirty magazine came out? The first printed pornography? about 125 years. So guess we knew what we wanted. Here is an image of the Oxford Gazette from 1665. This is one of the oldest surviving newspapers in the world. But you can look at this and immediately see a newspaper today. The only real difference is the printing quality is better. There's color, there's photographs, there's probably some graphics and some stuff there. But a nameplate across the top, who it's published by, a date, columns of text. And for the most part, from 1665 through the late 1990s, it was this plus some other little things. And our entire mode of consumption of most journalism was like this, was on the printed page. Now, of course, radio comes along after World War I, television comes along really right around World War II and take off dramatically. But they too have the same general problem that this mode of consumption has, which is I do my story today, it goes into the paper, it goes onto the air. Tomorrow's another day. And a newspaper was just thrown away. We didn't keep it. What was the point? That was yesterday's news. To the point that yesterday's news was it was a criticism. It meant it was inferior. So none of these things were ever connected. But the late 1990s comes along, and along comes the internet. And here is the BBC from 1998. Now look at this, 1998, and the New York Times from a day ago. Not all that different. Screen's a little wider because screens have gotten better. Photos representing a lot better. Fonts are a little better. But again, you got a nameplate on the top. You've got a date, date's over there. You got weather over here. You've got columns. If you go into an individual story, we've talked today, you've heard today about some fabulous journalism that's going on the internet that breaks all of these conventions. And I am a huge fan and I want to celebrate it. But on the internet, this is still the overwhelming bulk of what journalism looks like ultimately. It's a written story that's anywhere from 500 to 1,000 words, whether it needs to be or not. And this New York Times story about a Dutch court convicting some people. Still a mindset of, I do my story today, it goes on the internet, I forget about it, I'm doing a different one tomorrow. So this is the deeply ingrained habit that has to die. And my first chance to really take a crack at this happened in 2009. Or, I'm sorry, not 2009, 2006, when I got a phone call from a politics reporter at the paper that I was working at. And when I say paper, I mean it. This company believed in its core. It was a newspaper company. Ink on dead trees shipped out by the truckload every day. That was it. That was its whole identity. And it couldn't be anything else. Well, he came to me and said, I think I've got this idea for how we can cover politics differently. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Let's talk. And PolitiFact was born. It was not the first fact-checking website on the internet. It was probably the second. Factcheck.org was the first. But we had some different ideas of how we were going to fact check things. And one thing that fact checkers were not doing at that time was calling fouls when they occurred. So we wanted to say this was true, this was false. To the point of the first version that we built, we actually called it the campaign referee. And it involved these stick figures that had a referee's jersey on, and they were making these sort of indecipherable hand gestures to indicate something was true, false, anything like that. Eventually, we ended up with a meter and a 6-point meter at PolitiFact. So true, mostly true, half true, mostly false, false, and everybody's favorite, pants on fire, which is an American expression that means liar, liar, pants on fire. Kids would sing that to each other. Side note, to this day, there is an editor somewhere, I don't know where he's at now, who I am still mad at. And if I were to meet him on the street outside right now, I would start yelling at him. We almost bought pantsonfire.com. We could have, but somebody owned it and they wanted $3,000 for it. Now in 2007, when we were doing this, the newspaper was making money and $3,000 wasn't that much money to that newspaper. We could have just wrote a check and it had been pantsonfire.com. Nope. They cheaped out and said, we're going to start something new. And then they came up with the word PolitiFact. I'm still mad. I'm still mad. I want pantsonfire.com. But the real secret to why PolitiFact is interesting has nothing to do with the fact checking. News organizations had been doing fact checking all along. They just relegated it to just about 2 weeks before an election, and they always put it in the back of the paper and didn't put a lot of priority to it and didn't put a lot of effort into it. I wrote fact check stories when I was a reporter, and they were boring. And the way that we wrote them was, this person says this person says this, you be the judge. It was weak. What makes PolitiFact interesting is we didn't view it as a newspaper product from the beginning. We viewed everything we did as data, not as net. Well, it was data, but each little bit of data was journalism. And we broke the whole thing up into just a million pieces and assembled that into a database. So the idea here was that by extracting a structure out of the journalism that we were trying to create, we could then do things that newspapers could not do. We could do things that would serve our readers. And we would acknowledge that facts had a longer life than one day. You would hope that facts were eternal, but in politics, nothing ever is. So maybe a fact will last a few years. Each fact check that we did would add to the greater whole, that there was value in the archives. There was value in each fact check. There was value in building a track record for each politician. So you could pull up and look, did this politician lie before? What did they lie about? So we really, really went at this idea that news is data, not news is about data, not we're going to do data journalism here. The very idea, the very atomic structure of the entire molecule we were trying to build was data. And so this is when I pulled up at breakfast this morning. The former president of the United States did not fare well in fact checking. I hope you live a long and happy and healthy life, not concerning yourselves with former American presidents. But the thing that you have to understand here is that just right here, you have elements of data. Who said it? When did they say it? Where did they say it? What did they say? These are topics that we would create to add to this. And we added a rating to this. All told, the content management system that I built for PolitiFact had 17 different individual elements of data that went into every single fact check. And every one of those we used to create the site. You could sort this data any way you wanted to. You could look up any of these things. You could move around the site through this data in ways that were impossible on the regular newspaper.com website that we were paying tens of thousands of dollars to keep going. And you could do it much, much faster. But what I'm talking about here, let me say this first. What I'm talking about here, don't get me wrong. I'm exceedingly proud of the work that I did on PolitiFact. I'm exceedingly proud that literally the first website that I programmed and built and sent out onto the internet as a professional ran almost untouched and without going down or crashing or anything like that for almost 8 years before it was time to go in and update it. 8 years on the internet is a lifetime. That is a millennia. And so the work that we did in conceptualizing the journalism differently is something that I'll be proud of. PolitiFact, because it won the first Pulitzer Prize for a website, will be in the first paragraph of my obituary. I know that now. Hopefully I'm a long way away from dying, but it doesn't matter. But what we're doing here through the lens of 2022 is very, very primitive. It is so simplistic that most data scientists these days wouldn't waste their time on it. So I have thought for a long time of how this needs to evolve, and a technology is emerging now that I think has the potential of adding a massive robotic layer to every journalist. And they're called language models. A language model is essentially, well, it's what marketers call AI. There's a lot of stuff on the internet you'll read about AI that, pardon my French, is bullshit. It just is. It's made up crap. It's a bunch of statistical tricks to make it look like the computer is thinking. And it's not. What a language model is tens of millions of documents that a gigantic statistical model has been built on top of. And that statistical model looks at words. Each individual word is a piece of data. Each 3-word grouping is a piece of data. Each sentence is a piece of data. Each paragraph is a piece of data that all overlaps. And this statistical model builds a predictive algorithm that just says, if I say this, the next likely word is going to be this. That's it. That's all that it does. Now, I say that, but we're talking PhD level data science, data and computer science here. The explanation is easy. The implementation is exceedingly hard and requires massive amounts of computing. But like all things on the internet, we are at a point now where developers are making these models available to people for free. And they're creating services where you can just pull up a website, type in a prompt, say, explain the planet Jupiter to a 5th grader. And it will do that. And it will do it accurately. In fact, oh, this is a different one. This is a language model called GPT-3. You can go out on the internet right now and use GPT-3 for free. The prompt here is, write a creative ad for the following product to run on Facebook aimed at parents. And the prompt is, Learning Room is a virtual environment to help students from kindergarten to high school excel in school, excuse me. This is what a computer wrote without human intervention at all. Are you looking for a way to help your child excel in school? Look no further than Learning Room. It sounds like an ad. Why does it sound like an ad? Well, there's tens of millions of ads in the model, so it knows what an ad sounds like and can predict, based on these facts here, what it should look like. There is another one. I just was reading about this the other day. Facebook created this. It's a model called Galactica, which, being a Gen Xer and having watched Battlestar Galactica, I was immediately attracted to this model. It is based on science texts. So those of you who have had to take a science class and had to write a paper, what Galactica would do is you could type a few words from the paper that you were trying to cite, and Galactica would create the citation for you to just drop in there. You could ask Galactica here, translate the following math formula. Anybody able to do that? I'm not. Heck no, I went to journalism school. I ran far away from that. Any math that involves squiggly lines, I'm out. I'm done. Galactica will tell you what it is. The Riemann zeta function is the sum of reciprocals of the positive integers to the power of s. Okay, sure. Absolutely, I understand that clearly. But that's what this model can do. It's trained on 78 million scientific papers. Now, I want you to stop and take a breath. Remember what we talked about earlier about when you are presented with false information. You're there to get a reaction. You're there to create an emotional response. And the emotional response that a lot of journalists have from a computer writing nearly perfect copy is, hold the phone. I don't want this. Make it go away. I would like to have a job, please. Please do not let the computers do all the writing. You can calm down a little bit. What these language models are good at is writing about things that lots and lots of people have written about. They are bad at writing about things that people have not written about. And if I had to stand here and come up with a very good definition of what news is, writing about something that a lot of people have not written about would be a pretty decent one. This is new information. A language model is going to struggle. This is maybe my most favorite piece of writing on the internet right now. It comes from the documentation of Galactica, and it tells you everything you need to know about how much should we trust these algorithms just yet. Here is the limitations. Language models can hallucinate. They're telling you that in certain circumstances, their very, very fancy, very, very expensive language model takes drugs and sees things that aren't there and just makes stuff up. Students in the room who have taken a test and you didn't know the answer to the question, did you just make stuff up? Don't answer that. There are professors in the room. But yeah, you did. You totally made it up. Well, you are Galactica. There are no guarantees for truthful or reliable output from language models, even large ones trained on high quality data like Galactica. Never follow advice from a language model without verification. Why do they have to put that in there? Because this is trained on science. So somebody might ask, can I drink acid? And it'll go, sure, go right ahead. Because why would any scientist write a paper, and why would thousands of scientists write a paper about eating or drinking acid? They wouldn't. Language models are often confident but wrong. I want you to think about somebody in your friend group right now who that describes perfectly. Confident but wrong. There are people squirming in their chairs right now. It's like, oh, he's looking at me. The text may appear very authentic and highly confident, but might be subtly wrong in important ways. This is important because it opens the door for journalists to continue to do what we do. What it also does, if I'm thinking about this as a robotic extension to myself as a reporter, is that if a lot of journalists have written about something a lot, I do not want to repeat that. If a computer can provide context for me, if a computer can provide background and history, if a computer can take my story, the archives of the organization that I work for, and the archives of thousands of other news organizations, and write me a couple of paragraphs or even a whole page that just says, if you're just now catching up to this scandal in the president's office, here's everything you need to know. Then by golly, I'm going to let the computer do that. And I'm going to keep digging for new information that the computer can't do anything about. While we're on the subject of archives, I truly believe the archives are the most valuable asset that a news organization has that they aren't doing anything with. And one of the original sins of news on the internet was we never thought about these URLs to our stories living in eternity. And so now we have old stories floating around out there. Well, they have a value, and we should be able to leverage that value and use them. I would love to see, and I am trying to do this myself, news organizations use something called graph databases. Heard of graph databases? Graph databases are like, think of a spreadsheet. But now I want you to think about thousands of spreadsheets in three-dimensional space. And these spreadsheets are connected to each other by relationships. That is a graph database. So if I have data on the government, the central government here, this node here is probably the president. This node here is probably the vice president, and so on and so forth, to where everything in the language is now connectable. So this could begin to surface stories out of the archives that we may not even know exist. We may not even realize that this issue in front of the city, the city government is actually connected to this thing that happened 50 years ago. And we're just now dealing with the fallout of it. This graph databases plus language models could begin to actually create value out of those archives. And you, the reporter, need merely only advance the story by one little bit. Add new information to it. Your story now builds onto the whole. The language model gets smarter. The reader has more background and experience with this and understands what's going on even more. And with two pieces of information, two pieces of technology, and a vastly underutilized asset that we've had laying around, suddenly we now have news that lives more than a day. This is going to be controversial. I might get some stuff thrown at me by any of the faculty in the room, but I honestly think news organizations should be looking at Wikipedia for what an article page should look like. It's a living document that gets updated. Things move forward, things change. New facts are introduced, but old facts still have value. People could understand more and deeply about a topic. Instead of us writing, the president said this today, second paragraph, president was speaking here, third paragraph, he was referencing something, maybe one more paragraph, and we move on. We've lived with this assumption that the reader is going to remember all this stuff, and they don't. They don't. And it's time we acknowledged it. So all of what I'm talking about here is a robotic extension of the mind. A reporter could do this, but they would have to have a truly breathtaking amount of knowledge stored in their head of what is going on in their country, in their community, in the region, in the world, to connect all these things together. A computer is just going to do a better job of that. They just are. But it's not just my mind that I use as a reporter. I also have my physical body. I take my presence to places. I go and I witness things with my eyes. And as we've been talking about today, a lot of times that's this. By the way, I should just do this while I have it out. Hello, everybody. Okay, one for the souvenir. Okay, so if I'm going to a place, how do I extend my body? Well, this is an extension of your eyes. This is an extension of your ears. But this is also connected physically to you. It goes as far as your arm can go. If you get creative and stick it in a tree and have a remote trigger or something like that, okay, maybe, but we're still no further along. I spent a lot of years, I spent 10 years as a reporter in Florida. And Florida is one of the most hurricane-prone places on planet Earth. Now, I am a Midwestern small-town kid. I grew up in the Great Plains of America. We don't have hurricanes. We have snow, it's cold in winter. We have tornadoes in the spring. We have heat in the summer We get it all, but we don't get hurricanes. So I didn't know what a hurricane was like until I actually had to experience one. One of the scariest nights of my life. I am in a hotel in a small town in Florida, and by pure dumb luck, I am right where the hurricane is making landfall. And so my hotel, which was a building built in the 1960s, when Florida did not have building codes. So there is no reinforcement on this building to make it hurricane resistant. We are watching the walls of the building move 6 inches at a time. That much. We are waiting for the glass to explode and come flying into the room. We are so concerned for this that we have taken all of our camera gear and our computers and everything. We have put them in the bathtub. We have taken the mattresses off the bed, put them over the bathtub, and that's where we were going to go when the roof of the building was ripped off. That's how we were going to survive. Fortunately, the walls and the windows held, and the eye of the hurricane went over. And the eye of a hurricane is as calm as this room is right now. And it's as quiet as this room would be if I stopped talking. That's what it sounds like. There's a low rumble, and that's it. Mostly what you hear, dogs barking. Why? Because people's dogs have been inside for 4 hours. They got to let them out. The eye of the hurricane is their chance to let their dogs go out to go to the bathroom. And so we walked outside, and I'm looking up, and I am looking at the moon through the eye of a hurricane. You can see clouds on a wall 60 miles wide. And I'm looking at a hole in the sky. It's night. And then we see the other side of the eye wall coming over, and we have to go back in and hunker down and just hope. We got about 2 hours of sleep that night. Got up the next day, had to go cover a hurricane. And this is what it looks like. It's just houses ripped to shreds and left in piles. What makes it even more disorienting is hurricanes tend to rip the street signs off of poles. It tends to rip the poles out of the ground. So if you don't have GPS, you don't even know where you are. You have no way to navigate. You can hold up a map, but you're guessing because you have no way to know if that street is that street. It's very, very hard in words to describe to an audience what this looks like and just what this means. So I did this for years and tried to come up with this. And I did data journalism to try to explain to people how widespread this damage is. But I was always stuck on the ground. There was one time the newspaper had enough money to rent a helicopter, and they put me in the helicopter. If anybody asks you, do you want to take a helicopter ride after a hurricane? The answer is no, you do not. Because the air feels like a boiling pot of water. It's humid and it's going like this. And it's blowing in all different directions. And there is no rhyme or reason to it. If you are at all a nervous flyer on an airplane, you will hate everything about a helicopter after a hurricane. We'd be flying along and it would just suddenly drop 2 feet. Just like that. I watched my stuff rise up off the floor and then wham. At one point we flew by 2 buildings and it knocked the helicopter over on its side. I'm looking straight down at the ground from my seatbelted seat. The pilot was a military veteran who flew missions in Vietnam. And he was like, whoa, that was bad. About 15 minutes after he said that, I finally couldn't handle it anymore. I had an overnight bag in the seat next to me. I grabbed it, pulled all of my clothes out of it, and couldn't take it anymore. It was so violent. I left the paper. I started working as a professor at the University of Nebraska, and I happened to stumble across a Belgian company selling what they called a fully autonomous aerial mapping platform. And suddenly I realized I could have a drone. This is 2011. I walked up to the guy. I said, "Here, take my money." And he laughed and he gave me my wallet back. And he said, "These drones are $65,000 each. And oh, by the way, they're completely illegal in the United States." And I was heartbroken. But I went back to the college. This is my first week on the job. I went to the dean, my boss, and I said, "Drones are going to be a big deal for journalists. I want them. I want to hand them to children. I want to hand a flying lawnmower to children." And he said, "Okay, do that." I still can't believe he did that. So we started the drone, too fast. Started the drone journalism lab. This is right outside my door in my office. That is one of my drones flying there. This is light years from where we started. We started with a drone that was about this big. It was made of styrofoam. It barely had enough power to take off, and you couldn't fly it outside because any wind at all would knock it down. The second drone we had no stability control to it at all. The pilot had to control everything. It was dangerous to fly. And it crashed itself into the middle of a river. When DJI started selling drones like this that we could buy off the shelf, the camera is stabilized with a gimbal and it shoots in 4K. And that drone right there is about $1,800. Here is my credit card. That's not 65,000. Here you go. If we meet up later and you want to hear a fun story, ask me about drone regulations in the United States and how I almost ended up in federal prison because the FAA doesn't know how to regulate drones. It's a fun story, but I don't have time for it right now. I know. I'll get there. So, relaxing. It was so quiet. It was very, very nice. Let's see. Can I get this? Oh boy. Cancel that. This is supposed to be a video. This is a recent hurricane in Florida near Fort Myers, Florida. I'm just gonna have to describe it to you. Yeah, nope, not going. All right, anyway. This drone is able to just fly along this road, a road that is impassable. Just over the horizon here, there is a bridge that no longer exists. Nobody could get to the island across to the other side of that bridge. The only way to see it was with a drone. In 2005, when I covered 4 hurricanes in 2 months, that would have been impossible. Now you can walk to an electronics store and buy a breathtakingly amazing camera that looks like God himself is holding the camera still and just fly down a road. And that's normal. But what I think about with drones is not these beautiful images that they give us. And don't get me wrong, they are amazing. and they have value. But what this drone is really giving us as journalists is something that we should strive for in every story we tell, which is context. How big is this thing? How far does this go? What does this look like if you step back just a little bit? A lot of new pilots, I teach a class every year, it will start here in January, about how to get your drone license in the United States. And you do have to have a license. The Federal Aviation Administration makes you have a license to follow all the laws. You got to learn all the laws, you got to take the test, here it is. It's not that hard. You can learn it. Come to Lincoln sometime in January. In 3 weeks, you'll have your federal drone license in the United States. It doesn't take that long.
Well, stay late in America and do everything is on paper. Welcome to late in America.
I talked about drones in Concepcion, Chile, 2016-ish, and I looked at Chilean drone rules, and they were similar to the United States, where you had to take a test. But the trick was you had to be 16. Okay, no problem. You had to be in good health. All right, good. And you had to be able to read and write Spanish. And my question was, how well? Because I could probably fake my way through their test, knowing enough Latin roots that I could get through the language part and probably get it right. But I opted not to do that. But yes, rules in a lot of places are very, very soft. In the United States, they're not as easy as they are in a lot of places. But a lot of beginning drone pilots immediately want to take the drone and shoot it up to 100 meters in the air. And with the camera on those drones, they're a wide angle lens. At 100 meters in the air, you're talking about, you're making Google Maps at that point. That's what it looks like. It looks like Google Maps. It's just little teeny tiny houses and little teeny tiny cars driving down little teeny tiny streets. The best drone work is between 10 and 30 meters, no higher. And they are simple movements. You should watch great cinema. If you watch great movies and how they were filmed, you will know how to make your drone fly. Smooth, simple, fluid motions, and you'll create something amazing. I'm going to try this. Two recent examples. I'm guessing that's saying I don't have an internet connection. No. This is a three-dimensional model that's made entirely of photographs, still photographs. A government office in the United States, US Geological Survey, flew over a volcano in Hawaii over and over and over and over again. And they have thousands of images. With software you can download from the internet, you can make three-dimensional models out of that and let people play with them and look at them from whatever angle they want to. Let me show you another example here. That will take just a second because I am bad at Spanish. This one should open it. Oh, damn it. Okay. Well, oh, it did work. This is a three-dimensional model that a student of mine created of a house that was wiped out by Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. She wrote a story about the woman who lived here and how her life had been irreparably changed by the storm, and how the house that her grandmother lived in and her mother lived in and she lived in was now uninhabitable. And you can go to wherever you want on this house. It is a fully realized three-dimensional model. You can walk on her porch. You can walk up to her front door. We put this into virtual reality where you could walk up the hill to her house. And at certain points where you got there, it triggered audio and you could hear her talking about the home. To me, this is where drones really could take us. Can we take this tool that we've been given that has an obvious journalistic purpose and extend it to the point that we are literally creating reality? We are creating augmented reality, we are creating virtual reality, and we are letting our readers follow us to the places that we are going to do our journalism. So I want to just leave you with a couple of questions. Why do we continue to let journalism's path dictate its future? Because that's the way we've always done things. We don't need to. You don't need to. Why does it still feel like a lot of the journalism that we do on the internet could have just as easily been printed in a newspaper? Why does it feel like a lot of the video journalism that we do just as easily could have been broadcast on television and forgotten about because it just went out into the airwaves? We don't have to do this. We also don't have to limit ourselves as journalists by our own physical form. This sounds bonkers to say out loud. It sounds insane. You would be permitted to ask, how much did I have to drink at lunch? Because it was clearly a lot. That I'm sitting here saying you can break the bounds of your mortal self and extend your ability to create information. All you need is a little bit of technology. All you need is a little bit of code, a little bit of data, a little bit of time. And most importantly, you need to not be afraid of it. Embrace it. I don't know is my favorite thing to say to students. They ask me a question, I say, I don't know. Let's go find out. Let's go figure this out. I am arrogant enough to believe the difference between I don't know and I do know is a function of time. It's just time. I'm going to figure it out eventually. Would it be easier if I was an engineer? Sure. Would it be easier if I was Elon Musk? Absolutely. The billions help. They really do. But that doesn't stop me. And it's not going to stop me, and it never will stop me. So I hope it doesn't stop you either. Thank you for staying awake after lunch. That's not easy to do. And enjoy the rest of the conference. Questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, so you said at the beginning of your presentation that you would love to have better reporters who have kind of jargon, gadgets, right?
Yeah.
So my question is more about like what happens with stuff like war journalism. I hear recently that today not as many reporters go there to the front line, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is actually, what I'm curious about is that if you are in the front line, you can feel stuff that you won't feel if you have like a drone, right? You know how it smells. see all like better. You will also die. Yeah, maybe. But you will, I don't know, in my opinion, maybe that makes a better job. Well, not like dying, but yeah. But isn't it better if you are like there? Don't we lose like stuff that we can see, hear, or feel if we are there?
My answer to you is, why don't we do both? There are places, there is the front, and then there is so close that you're able to get photo and video of the front, which is an exceedingly dangerous place to be. You don't need to be that close, but this guy can. Now this is old. This robot has updated a bunch, but you are a few $1,000s away from having your own fully articulated robot that if you are in a very, very dangerous place, you can set him down and go, walk that way. I'm going to be back here where the people hiding out are, which is where the story is. And I'm going to let you go down there and get the video of the shooting and the explosions. And if that thing dies, do I feel bad? Yeah, he's kind of cute. Like, am I going to feel bad when I think of the guinea pig that I had as a kid, as a pet, when I eat kui later on? Probably. Am I still going to eat it? Yes. Yes, I am. Am I going to send that guy to die? Absolutely. He's not a human. I can replace him with a few $1,000s. I cannot replace you. So
also in real war, like Ukraine, they are not going to let you go.
That close.
That moment. I mean,
yeah.
You know, they will bring you as close as they can, and the drones are going to ask, but be closer, closer there. But there will be a moment where they will say, till there. I mean,
yeah.
Here it's dangerous. So the drone will allow you to go.
You're gonna get to go to the edge of artillery range, is what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, sure.
Will you still buy engine on fire.com?
Today?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Luis,
go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
My first one is,
This.
I did to math. So the first one is the root machines replace forever the world of journalists.
No.
The second one is the what do you think that are the principal limitations related with the reporting with the drone? Because many people could say that yes, it's an advantage for a lot of things that in the past couldn't know.
Yep.
Higher hammer or something.
Yep.
And what do you think about the previous one?
Yep. Okay, so the two questions: will robotics, will AI replace the work of a journalist? And here's what I will tell you: if a computer can write a story as well as you can, faster than you can, it's not you, it's the story. The story is too easy. It's too formulaic. A computer is going to do a good job of that. A computer is not ever going to interview somebody who has lost a family member to violence. A computer is never going to be able to empathize with that person, to understand what loss is, to understand what pain is. It's a computer. Now, if you're writing a story that says, you know, Ecuador beat Qatar 3-1 in the first match of the World Cup, which probably going to happen. And you just need 3 paragraphs to put on the website immediately after the match is over. Computer can do that, no problem. Why are you wasting your time? And if you could be covering the World Cup, what are you doing here? Like, go. I wouldn't blame you one bit. So that's the thing you got to remember is If a computer can do a better job writing the story than you can, it's the story, not you. Don't do that story. Let the computer do that story. There's a million other stories that are better that you, the human, can do that the computer will never be able to do.
We spoke about that, I don't know, in one class. After an earthquake in California, the bots do that. They said there was an earthquake that amount of in that place.
Within milliseconds of it being registered on a seismograph. That quick. You can pull up the Los Angeles Times and they will have a story while the ground is still shaking. It's that fast. Does a human being need to do that? Well, a human being did that for 50 years, but they don't need to anymore. Move on to things that are hard. Call a human. Like, that's a thing a computer can't do, is call a human and talk to them. The other question is, what are the limitations of drones? Well, I'll give you a simple analogy here. If I'm, what I do, here it is. If I'm over here, if we're outside and I'm doing this and I'm just recording video like this, are you uncomfortable? Are you uncomfortable with that? Maybe just, you're having me walking by, here I am. You're kind of like, well, that was weird. Okay. How about now?
No. Now.
Now put 4 spinning blades on this thing. There comes a point where I don't want that thing anywhere near me. I'm pretty firmly convinced there's 3 countries in the world when it comes to privacy. There is the Germans, who have meticulously written, documented, widely understood privacy rules. You can do this, you cannot do that. And it's very clear, and I swear every German understands them perfectly. Because when I took a drone to Germany and talked to a journalism conference, I was assaulted by people going, "What about the privacy?" And I'm, okay, I don't know German privacy rules, like, calm down. And the United States, and in a lot of countries, the rules about privacy are, it's probably fine until it's not. There comes a point where if I'm in my backyard, I have a big fence around, and I expect to be private there, and you take your drone and you fly it right here over my head in my backyard, that's not okay. And literally no person is going to say, "What do you mean that's not okay? That's totally fine." There's a line in there somewhere. Is that 10 meters above your house? Is that 20 meters above your house? Is it 100? Most countries have not grappled with what that is. The third country in the world is, what's privacy? Like, just, we have so many other problems in the world, we're just not going to bother even thinking about this. Do whatever you want. Don't care.
Which would be us?
I don't know. You tell us. Yeah, I say, you tell me. You live here. So
we have a little already yesterday. There are some kind of rules.
yeah, but I mean, but that's kind of where it is. It's like, there are some rules, but we haven't really tested them out, so we don't really know what they are. In my lab, at the drone journalism lab at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, I'm going to tell you this, and you're going to think it's a joke, but it's not. It's 100% the truth. Rule number 1 in the drone journalism lab at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, the Harvard of the Plains, is don't be stupid. Rule 2. Rule 1, don't be stupid. Rule 2 is see rule number 1. If you cannot be stupid, you're probably going to be fine in literally every country in the world. Go ahead. I'll go to the back there. Go ahead. Okay. What's the consequences for flying a drone in a military situation? Okay. Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Without question, Ukraine is the best example we have right now, because it's the war we have. It's a very modern war, and Ukrainian soldiers are using the same drones that journalists use. They are using DJI drones off the shelf. They're buying them by the pallet load, taking them out. They have 3D printed these release mechanisms, and they hang grenades from them and send them out. And they're cheap enough in the military sense of the term that when Russians see them and shoot them out of the sky, they're like, oh, well, grab another one off the stack and off we go. And so, yes, if you are flying a drone with a camera into a combat zone, you can instantly be identified as a threat. You may be seen as a threat by the enemy. You may be seen as a threat by the side of the line that you're on. You might be seen as an intelligence asset by both. Like, you're going to really want to make damn sure that someone very high up in that area knows who you are and knows what you're doing. And then if it gets shot out of the sky, that's just the price of doing business. What you don't want to have them do is follow that radio signal back to where you are and do bad things. Go ahead.
Okay, so you talk about data.
I wouldn't necessarily use it to acquire data. I would use it as a model of a living document.
Okay.
That's more what I meant by that.
But we're not like citing it because it's not
Correct. Because it's manipulatable. But what I'm interested more is this idea of a page that provides history and context and further research and links out, that we could borrow that style for our own archives and do that kind of thing. There are a lot of language models that do actually use Wikipedia because it's an enormous structured annotated data set. So underneath GPT-3 somewhere, Wikipedia is in there, but so are millions of other things. I'm more interested in the way that it's structured. I think that's really interesting as just sort of a method of delivery. So, yeah.
Yeah, you said that language models can be used for content, but they always have to be verified. So
Yes.
like the program that also like protocol verification.
Yeah. I actually envision a new job in a newsroom being the AI editor. Like, your job is to just look at this output and based on your own human judgment and knowledge, edit that. They're not perfect grammar wise. By the way, for my own purposes, the translation ability that they have, the ability to translate English to Spanish, Spanish to German, German to Italian, it's actually amazingly good. It's really good. So it opens up opportunities for internationalization of your content that weren't there before. But yes, I would not take a chunk of text from a language model and just be like, good enough. Just gonna send it out to the internet. That's fine.
I was thinking like information one, like the quality of the data. So,
Yes.
wouldn't you better like write it yourself?
Well, possibly, but it all, I think what we lack here is an example where somebody has tried to make it work. And what I'm most interested in is finding that line where if you have this many stories about it, then it's really good. And if you have fewer than that, the further down you go, the more insane that it gets, and that it's just straight up making things up. A friend of mine who is a professor at Syracuse University used a tool called Otter.ai to record interviews for a book that he wrote. And Otter has the same sort of transcription problem that a lot of ones have. It's really good. It's really, really good, but it will occasionally garble up language and things like that. So we got the idea to take that, the garbled language, and feed it to another language model to fix it. And he went through the transcripts, he was reading them line by line, and he realized that the other language model got frustrated with speakers who changed subjects in the middle of a sentence. And then it just went and completed the sentence for them. It made up quotes. So there are very significant limits to this, but we are just starting out. And I think there's a lot of smoke there. To use the old expression, where there's smoke, there's fire. I think we have huge clouds of smoke billowing out of this thing, and somebody needs to go see what kind of fire they can build out of it. And I think there could be amazing results from that. But
very short stuff. What do you do in your lab with your students? What do they do? What do you do with them?
sure.
Do they fly? Are you working in new formats like mixing, aerial views with the down? Have you developed new formats? And if our kids want to pair 6 months in your university, can they?
Yes,
Yeah, to all of them?
all of it. So yes, thank you, and done. No. So unfortunately, the United States is the land of the underemployed lawyer. And so one thing that we have to do with everything is worry about lawsuits. So to fly drones as a state institution, as a university, we have to have insurance. We have aviation insurance, the same as a place that owns airplanes has aviation insurance. It's the same stuff. So in order to fall under the aviation insurance of the university, either I have to be standing next to the student while they fly, and I am the responsible party, or the student has to get their federal drone license, and then they can take one of my drones and go cover a story somewhere.
They are responsible.
And they are then responsible. Well, depends. They could have their own insurance, which you can actually get insurance pretty cheap. Like you can get a day's worth of insurance for like $20, which is worth doing. They can also fall under the university's insurance. So yeah, they're out doing stories. They're mixing aerials with grounds. They're doing sort of traditional broadcast packages where you have multicam setups, and one of them is a drone flying in the air. Nebraska is a big agricultural state. So every year I have students flying drones behind tractors that are harvesting crops, which is a beautiful way to see it. It's really hard to understand how huge it is until you get 30 meters above that tractor and just follow them around. So they're doing that. We've done things with virtual reality. We've done things with augmented reality using photogrammetry, where we take a lot of pictures and then build the models out of it. We're actually playing around a lot with doing photogrammetry with your phone. You can now do those augmented reality models right here on your phone. Just take a bunch of pictures, actually use video. Just wave your phone over it and it will take thousands of still frames just based on the video and render that 3D object all right there on your phone. Which, when we first started doing 3D objects in 2015, the software we used cost $3,000 a year to rent. You couldn't buy it. You had to keep paying for it over and over and over again. And it was like buying a really, really good drone every year. So, unfortunately, I'm going to tell you a secret about universities. Your instructors here, your professors are going to get you to the point where you're smart and you're capable and you can go out and you can do journalism, and then you're going to do something terrible and you're going to graduate and leave. And now we got to start all over again. So the number of students that I have that are inclined to do this kind of heavy duty software work, it goes up and down. I get a handful of them, they graduate and go away. Then I got a bunch of people who are scared of it for a few years and then they come back, and it goes like that. So yes.
So, ladies and gentlemen, he came from Nebraska with 2 meters of snow to be his use, so give him some words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hola. Sí.
Sí, voy a cambiar.
Tú lo estás haciendo perfecto en esa cámara porque él solo se movió de este lado y lo seguiste bien. En la del centro se me apagó, vine, la conecté y la dejé fija. No hace falta. Que todo más depende de cómo se mueven los speakers. Si la speaker, ella no se mueve, que limita el medio.
Ya. Hola. Y te puedes poner los pies atrás. Ya. Fíjate que me a ver. Contraseña y formato. $29, ¿no? 45 de dinero. 29,000. Ya, a ver. Capaz que era eso lo que pasaba. Ahí está. Tal vez es muy pesada esta vaina. ¿Alguien tiene AirDrop? Yo tengo. Probemos así, perdón. No te preocupes. ¿Te puedes poner, cómo te llamas? iPhone. Solo de Ana, iPhone 2.
¿Cómo estás?
¿Estás?
¿Bien tú?
Qué bueno verte. Aceptar files. ¿Le mando Tania? Sí. No sé si está mandando. No sé, ¿no? ¿Será que es muy pesado? Está como PDF. Sí.
Eso pensaba primero.
Te voy a mandar.
Era terrible, de vergüenza, porque yo llamaba, me colgaba. Llamaba, tenía que cerrar. Y era como.
Necesito proyectar. ¿Cuál es tu mail? O sea, de alguna forma tiene que funcionar. Ya te mandé por mail una copia comprimida.
Voy a abrir el
De todas las formas, todo.
Y a Marianela no le puse compartir. Sí, le puedo, pero no tampoco se me manda.
¿Cuál es tu mail?
Marianela. No, piedra. HI.
Gmail.
No, HITA. TA.
H-I-T-A. Ah, bien ahí.
De imagen verdaderamente significativa, no podemos ver en los demás la idea de que hay personas que uno piensa que puede entender, entender que es contra con todo lo que es, todo lo que es.
Aquí está. Uno comprimido. A ver. Último intento.
Chicos, no, es que necesitan una cámara.
Bueno, pero igual tampoco es tan necesario. Es solo porque no me gusta hablar con una cosa azul en la espalda. Entonces yo creo que estamos bien.
No pasa nada.
A ver, vamos a hacer el último intento porque este está comprimido. Tania y
Marianela.
Marianela Piedrahita. Send.
Ya me llegó.
Ya le llegó. Entonces a ti también porque les mandé a las dos por mail. Ya.
Ahora.
Siempre se puede.
La narrativa es un montón de gente. Pero lo que pasa es que los medios locales quieren hacer exactamente lo mismo con las personas. Entonces salen terribles, más de lo que son las demás de fondo. Estás jodiendo por los mares, por los entonces,
¿Sí?
Aquí había.
Bueno, bien. ¿Cómo les ha ido en el evento? Bien. Tienen chéveres expositores.
Sí, sí. A ustedes primero, los graduados.
No, súper chévere. La verdad es que, pero hay que promocionar un poco más, yo creería.
Este año en
Es
particular,
solo para estudiantes, no debe ser.
no, creo que la gente no confirmó rápido. O sea, yo tuve confirmada la gente.
Sí, sí, incluyéndome a mí.
Bueno, los internacionales. Yo me puse a pensar que están haciendo violencia la violencia.
¿Por la qué?
Por la violencia, por los ahorcados. Hasta que le
Pasa es que
confirmen.
también es una época complicada. O sea, en términos de ya viene Navidad, está el Mundial, quizás no los gringos, pero en general el mundo está como, es una época, y los gringos están, o sea, ahorita ya es noviembre, empiezan las fiestas porque tienen su acción de gracias y ya empezó. Tengo 4 o 5, pero más que nada